Have you ever sat down to play Resident Evil and thought, man, I would love to be a hero in a zombie apocalypse, that would be awesome, only to remember that you're just a normal person rather than a hardened mercenary or a trained operative? For a lot of us, we probably had that exact thought when we were teenagers, and though it didn't really break the immersion, it still kind of sucked that we couldn't really relate to our boulder-punching, back-flipping heroes of the noughties. That's where a lesser-known title by the name of Obscure comes in. Released in time for Halloween 2004, Obscure takes the classic survival horror tropes found in our favourite Resident Evil games and fuses them together with cheesy teen horror vibes. At first glance, it's easy to throw a game like Obscure to the side and call it a knockoff of our favourite, more mainstream horror titles. I mean, it does share a lot in common with games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, eerie environments that leave you fearing the unknown, grotesque creatures that drive your survival instincts through the roof, and even the story itself has a focus on unethical experiments gone horribly wrong. But beneath all that, Obscure has its own unique identity, drawing inspiration from 90s teen horror films where instead of rookie cops or experienced soldiers, you play as seemingly normal, albeit stereotypical, American teenagers. And instead of the game being set in a creepy mansion or European village, it's set in a generic high school in the fictional American city of Fall Creek. The game starts with a prologue where you play as the stereotypical jock Kenny Matthews, and it introduces you to the horrors hidden in the darkness at Leafmore High. The introductory cutscene is bright, hopeful even, with an amazing soundtrack that leaves you wondering how this could even be a horror game. But as soon as you take control of Kenny, it immediately dawns on you. This place is lonely and quiet. You could cut the tension with a knife. When you're done shooting hoops, which by the way he literally does not miss, you head to the changing rooms to hear your phone ringing.
Damn, that must be Ashley calling me. I should have turned off my cell phone.
During this cutscene, someone steals your bag, and so Kenny, being the reckless type, chases after the thief, who leads them to a secret passage in the school gardens. The passage itself takes you to what appears to be some kind of hidden laboratory, where after a little exploring, Kenny meets a bald guy, presumably another student who was also led down here in the past.
Huh? Oh, you fell for it too. We've got to get you out of here quick.
It's at this point that it's revealed to Kenny this was a trap, and he needs to get out of here before it's too late. Sadly, upon trying to exit, an egregious looking monster crashes through the wall, and no matter what you do, you simply can't escape. As the scene fades to black, you're left with quite a few questions. What the hell was that thing? What happened to Kenny? Who stole his bag? This concept hooked me immediately. I mean, I honestly went into this game expecting some goofy, cringe Resident Evil wannabe, but my immediate experience told me to expect something else, something far more sinister and far more engaging than I could have ever imagined. Following the prologue, you're introduced a bit further to the rest of the cast as Shannon, Ashley, and Josh discuss Kenny's whereabouts.
Hey ladies, what are you so gloomy about?
Kenny's disappeared.
This morning we are going to talk
I
about
think we'd
Jeanette.
better call the cops. What do you think?
Hey, if he doesn't show up, let's meet at the cafeteria at 6 and go look for him.
And eventually decide that they're going to search the school grounds after hours, since that's the last place they saw him. Remember when he was shooting hoops like his life depended on it?
Nothing works in this crummy school.
As the school empties and the janitor kindly locks 3 of our characters inside, you take control of Josh and are free to get started. Since you're locked in here, your first task is to figure out a way to escape, which was fairly straightforward. Pick up the baseball bat, test to make sure it works, and break the window to the storage room where you can find a lockpicking tool. You can use this to leave the room, but not without first teaming up with one of your classmates. This was the first thing to blow me away with this game. The co-op functionality is real, and something I wish I was actually able to try out with a friend on an old PS2 in front of a big square TV. If you don't have a buddy to live out your nostalgic dreams though, the game still allows you to take a partner with you to explore the school, which will instead be controlled by AI. You can also at any point swap between the characters and control whichever one you like, which leads me to my next point. The characters aren't just nobodies, shells of a person waiting to be controlled by you, the player. No, instead, each character has their own unique skills based on their personalities that makes the game easier or harder depending on who you choose. Our first character here, Josh, is the curious type, and as you can see from his school record, he'd make a pretty good journalist. This description about him is actually telling us his special ability, and we can use it throughout the game to help us when it's needed. Since Josh is a bit of an investigator, it means his ability will allow us to know whether or not a room has been fully explored, helping us find useful items to progress the story, or even weapons and ammo.
There's nothing left for us here.
Shannon, who also happens to be Kenny's sister, is the type to give her friends advice or support during exams. Her special ability, when used, will give us clues as to what we should do next, which is particularly helpful for if we get lost or stuck on a puzzle. She's also pretty good with medicine, which grants her a plus 25% recovery bonus when healing. Finally, Ashley is Kenny's girlfriend, and her special ability is damage. We can use it to deal more powerful attacks. All of these abilities are on cooldowns, so we can't spam them, but they are pretty useful. To start with, I chose to play as Josh with Shannon as my sidekick so that I could loot items easier and also get a little helping hand when I got lost or confused.
Okay, let's move.
From the moment you leave the room, the tension already hits a new high. Forced to explore the now empty halls of Leafmore High, you immediately feel a sense of unease, as though there's something waiting for you behind every corner. The lighting is dim, the classrooms are unnervingly silent, and the school itself turns a place of learning into something far more uncomfortable. It feels almost claustrophobic, even in the open and empty environments. Heading into the girls' bathroom, the camera pans directly from this vent. The game is holding our hand right now, giving us clear direction, which I thought was pretty nice since we're so early on in the game. Interacting with the vent gives us a bit of a perverse jump scare, only to tell us that we can't even open it without a tool. So we head back out and continue to explore the rest of the school. The atmosphere here is so chilling. The buzz of the nearby vending machines and the echoing of your own footsteps is used so well to really instill that sense of isolation. Even with a classmate by your side, you can't help but feel like the school they're exploring isn't even a school anymore. It's just too lifeless. Eventually, we find another door with a glass window, so we break that too and make our way inside the classroom. One thought I had at this point was these guys had no idea about what Kenny saw last night. They were just locked inside a school, and that's it. So why the hell did they immediately start breaking windows? Like, why was that the first thing we did to begin the story? I don't know, it just made me laugh. Anyways, we find a note on the teacher's desk which tells us about a missing screwdriver that 100% is in this room somewhere. Conveniently, we're actually looking for a tool like that to open the vent in the bathroom. So, after a bit of looking around, we find it hidden under this cabinet, and with the screwdriver in hand, we head back down to the bathroom, open the vent, and make our way into the teacher's bathrooms directly adjacent.
Don't even think about it.
With access to the teacher's break room, we find this rusty key on the table and head upstairs to explore further. Another thing that surprised me was how destructible the environment was. Sure, you couldn't break down walls or doors, but a lot of objects and surfaces you saw were programmed to be broken when hit, like this computer, which I thought was pretty cool. We also find the key to the teacher's room hanging on the wall here, and head into this storage room to see a puzzle that we would have to come back to later on. With only one last place to investigate, we head up the stairs in the hall to the very top of the building to find this filthy, decrepit door that seems to be oozing some kind of sludge. So naturally, our next step is to go through the door using that rusty old key we found. We're faced with a wide open space, seemingly forgotten about and left to the elements to look after. Taking a look around, we see cardboard boxes, furniture covered by sheets of fabric, and eventually, as we edge closer to this vent on the wall, our first enemy encounter and an important piece of information is revealed. These creatures are weak to light, instantly perishing when exposed to the sun. We can use this to our advantage as the game continues. During this cutscene, Mr. Walden tells us to find Mr. Friedman for reasons I'm not actually too sure of right now, and so we make our way down to the courtyard which Walden just opened for us. Our map tells us that Friedman is in the classrooms building to the west, so I take Josh and Shannon over there, only to find that in the very first classroom is another one of our classmates, Stan.
Stan, what What are you doing
dog.
here?
I just edited my notes.
Stan is pretty good at lockpicking, so his special ability is that he can do that faster than others, but I decided not to take him with us since Josh's item finding ability seemed a bit more useful right now.
You better quit jerking me.
Whilst I was exploring this room, I took 3 paper cups.
I took 3 paper cups. That should be enough.
Enough for what exactly? I wasn't so sure just yet. Back in the corridor though, we start picking the lock to this bathroom when Josh gets jumped by one of those creatures, but fortunately, heading inside despawns it for now. While I was in here, the game decided to play some atmospheric sound effects. I would really love to know who the hell voiced that scream, because whatever they were paid to do that, I can guarantee it wasn't enough.
Friedman is in the building.
Yeah, I'm not sure Friedman is going to be in the building for much longer. Okay, so this was the only jump scare in the whole game, I'm pretty sure. And I'm actually really mad about it too, because it kept me on the edge of my seat for the rest of the game, only for it to just never happen again. Even now, as I edit this video, it still made me jump. This is one of the tougher monsters in the game. We still don't know what exactly they are or why they're here, but the only weapons we have are melee weapons, so I made the executive decision to just not fight them. In fact, I just straight up ran back outside because in that moment I had no idea what I was supposed to do. The jump scare really caught me off guard. After collecting my thoughts, I toughened up and went back inside, this time strategically dodging past it since it wasn't fully blocking the hall. Josh did catch a stray hit from one of its attacks, but we managed to make it into this double door where we would find our next step in the story, figure out how to make it to the next floor. The door at the top of the stairs was locked with a rusty chain, and the text on the screen says, "How can I speed up the process?" Which honestly felt like my hand was being held a bit too hard there, but like if the hand was missing a finger or it was the wrong hand entirely, you know what I mean? To put it simply, the next step is to use the cups we found to transport acid from the lab next door, but I don't know, the wording of speed up the process just made it feel really silly. In the lab, we're ambushed by a bunch of those smaller creatures, but fortunately the windows in here are breakable, so we can use the sun to get rid of them fairly quickly, only taking a little bit of damage in the process. In here, we also get a little bit of information on what those creatures might be, or where it might have all started. The note reads, "The multifilia comes in the form of ciphers. The endemic plant allows microscopic buds to appear, which do not appear destined to form a new plant, but do possibly generate other leaves. The parasites and the spider-like appearance explain its capacity to propagate in an excessive manner. The black substance released is poisonous to its biological environment. The plant is particularly sensitive to light exposure. It fears the light." I'm not a big fan of games that tell their stories through completely missable notes, so this did throw me off a bit, but either way, we grabbed some acid from the back of the classroom
Quick, the cup is disappearing.
and used it to break off the rusty chain on the door. Also, Ashley took some damage on the way back, so I thought now would be a good time to point out that we've been collecting these energy drinks to heal ourselves from the vending machines around the school, and they are 100% Monster energy cans. I have no idea how they got away with this. As we pick the lock to another door, we yet again get jumped by the little guys before heading into another classroom. Fortunately, in this lifting, there's no perverted upskirt weirdness going on. There was, however, that screaming sound again.
Let's check the place out.
I'm positive there's still something left.
Seriously, get that guy an Oscar. Further down the hall in a different classroom, on the table we find Walden's satchel, with a bunch of documents inside, as well as this compass needle, which we would need for another puzzle later on. After picking it up, we get ambushed by some multifilia creatures, including a student with a knife. Breaking the window kills the little creatures, but not the student. Fortunately, a swift tap with the bat, and he falls in one hit. Going back up the hall, we find Friedman's office, the sign on the wall telling us that Friedman is the headmaster of Leafmore High. Still, I'm not sure why Walden would send us to find him instead of, I don't know, letting us go home, reporting Kenny's disappearance to the police. But either way, we head inside and find this map on the wall with 2 compass-shaped indents, as well as the second compass needle nearby. We put the needles in the map, but we're not too sure what to do with it just yet, so after a little playing around, we leave it for now. In the next room, there's also an answering machine with a missed message which we can listen to for some juicy lore.
Today at 5:38 p.m. Hello, Mrs. Smith? This is Miss Wixon. Could you ask Mr. Friedman to come see me as soon as possible? It's an emergency. I can't leave the infirmary. Make sure he comes quick. Thanks. Today at 6:50 p.m. Herbert? If you're there, pick up the phone. Please. Come quickly. I don't know what's going on, but I think it has something to do with the experiments. I saw several students who, well, it's really bad. Come quick. Oh no!
The nurse mentioned experiments, giving us even further insight to the cause of the Mortophilia creatures. This could have so easily been missed, so I'm glad I found it. Maybe some yellow paint would have helped a bit. Josh took a fair bit of damage getting into this room, so we leave him here to go find the answer to the puzzle, which is just in the room at the top of the corridor on this commemorative plaque, telling us the compass needles should point to longitude 330 degrees and latitude 20 degrees. Completing this puzzle opens a hidden safe, which gives us our very first gun, equipped with a mounted flashlight to fend off the Mortophilia, as well as some ammo, a cassette tape, a key to the library, and some lore. A letter from Friedman to one of the scientists responsible for all of this, which I accidentally skipped over. It was also at this point I noticed that when looking at the map, you actually have the ability to fast travel to the group's gathering point, which right now is in the courtyard, meaning we don't even need to run past the enemies that caused Josh so much harm in this building. Since Josh was low on health and we actually ran out of energy drinks, I decided to take Stan with me going forward, since he can pick locks faster, and that seemed to be one of the things that got us in trouble in the classrooms. Inside the library, we see a student sitting on the stairs who looks similar to the one Kenny saw in the prologue. Trying to talk to him shows us it was simply too late for him, as he suddenly breaks out into this Mortophilia-induced seizure before trying to attack us. I was a little bit stupid here. I was trying to shoot my gun, but I was pressing the wrong button the entire time. On the controller, you would assume that if the aim button is L2 or left trigger, then the shoot button would be R2 or right trigger. No, it was A or X on my PS4 controller. Shannon took a bunch of damage during my mishaps, so I thought it would be best to try and explore this area with just Stan, leaving Shannon outside for now. Again, I took a bunch of damage trying to kill these guys, but I did eventually put them both down without dying. In one of the classrooms, we find this projector which appears to be turned on, and breaking the window on this door reveals an administration room, where we would also find a piece of paper with a number that's been scribbled out, and a safe on the wall. We would need to use the projector in the classroom to reveal the code to the safe using that paper we just picked up. Going back and doing this shows us the code to the safe is 2432, and opening the safe gives us a letter to two of the scientists that were working on the Mortophilia experiments. The letter mentions that the scientists held a conference discussing eternal life, and what they had discussed was completely contradicted by their actual discoveries, that their research was immoral and unethical, and that they should probably relocate to a safer, more secluded place to avoid sanctions and interruptions. In the safe was also a key to the inner library, but before heading deeper, I decided to switch out Stan for Ashley, since she was the only one with full health right now. Heading into the actual library room itself, we discover Friedman sitting alone, who seemed to be more concerned about the fact that we're still at school, rather than the creatures or our missing friend.
Mr. Freeman, it's horrible.
Why are you still here? Why aren't you at home?
But sir, they're these disgusting creatures.
Here on the school grounds?
Yes, they're everywhere. You've got to do something. Kenny's missing. Mr. Walden said that he'd call the police,
What?
but...
Mr. Walden is
And
here?
it's a good thing, too, because he saved
Go right now and see the janitor. He'll let you out. I'll tell him you're coming.
But
And don't let me see you back until tomorrow morning.
what about Kenny?
I'll take care of everything. The best thing you can do for now is to get out of here.
As day turns to night and the sun eventually sets, we're left with a much more hostile environment going forward, one where we can't use the daylight to our advantage, and we would instead begin to rely on our flashlight and bullets. As per Friedman's advice, our next step is to find the janitor who will supposedly let us out of the school, but a quick look inside the janitor's room and we would find his mangled corpse. We also found a shotgun in the closet and a torch that we could tape to it. In the janitor's office, we found the key to the dining hall as well as our next mission, save the nurse.
What? The nurse? What's she doing? She's asking for help. I've got to go save her right now.
There was also a tape on the desk which had footage of the last time we saw Kenny, revealing to us that it was Friedman who stole his bag and led him down to the secret passageway in the school's gardens. Viewing the other tape we found earlier on in the day also shows us that Kenny is actually still alive and well, so we know that we can still save him. The sick bay is connected to the dining hall, so we head there first with the key we just found, and put our brand new shotgun to use before picking up a new pistol. Deeper into the dining hall, we're almost ambushed by a group of creatures, but I decided it was best to just run past them since I was alone, only stopping to pick up a crispy Monster Energy. Fortunately, there was also a first aid kit in this room. In the next area, we get a bit of a surprise from one of the bigger enemies, but thanks to Ashley's strength ability, we're able to take it down using our shotgun in just a few shots. I was worried this would be a bit of a boss battle, so I'm glad Ashley came in clutch for this moment. On the ground behind it, we find a box of fuses, and we can hear the nurse in the sickbay begging for help. Since it's dark and she can't see who we are, she says she isn't opening the door until the lights are back on. I think you can see where this is going. Since I had a first aid kit now, I decided to head back to the gathering point and pick up the ever so helpful Shannon,
I feel great now.
restoring her to full health. Then I headed back to the dining hall. The fuse box was just on the wall behind these enemies, so Shannon and Ashley made light work of cleaning them up. Then we got started on the fuse box puzzle. The idea here was to connect the coloured wires to their corresponding boxes at the top, whilst avoiding the broken wires, so after a little playing around, we got the lights on, thus clearing the area of Mortophilia. Nice. Back at the sickbay, the nurse finally lets us in, but she's far too traumatized to make sense of what she's saying.
Kenny? Do you know where he is?
Kenny. Oh, another one. Kenny.
What do you mean another
Herbert?
one?
He never let them out
Herbert?
before.
He's the maniac
It's
who
Leonard.
kidnapped Kenny?
He wants to
Leonard,
get
that
out.
name rings a bell.
There's no way to stop
She's
him.
totally
He's
traumatized.
just...
Also, the voice lines overlap here for some reason. They've actually been doing this all game, so it was a little hard to understand what was actually being said. Fortunately, the valve barricading the door was a clear enough sign that we need to go back into the main building we started off in and solve the very first puzzle we saw. Inside this building, the place has now been overrun by Mortophilia and damaged beyond belief. The stairs are completely inaccessible and there's debris everywhere. Back in the teacher's room, we make our way to the storage area, pop the valve in the shelf, and reveal a hidden door. Inside this room is a reel of film called Archive 23, which we won't be able to watch just yet. Then, leaving the storage room, we bump into Walden again.
Mr. Walden, what are you doing?
I'm looking for Friedman.
I don't think he's around here. I bet he's still in the
You know
library.
where he is. Where did you see him?
I saw him in the library, but that was quite a while ago. Hey, wait! Do you think Friedman knows what's going on?
Possibly.
Can I go with you?
No. What about Kenny?
I have reason to believe that Kenny is being held prisoner in the basement, and there seems to be a way down through the auditorium, but I need you to give me the key. Do you have one?
I shouldn't, but what's the difference? Here.
Thanks. Hey, don't go!
So, with the key to the auditorium, we fast travel back to the meeting point and begin making our way over there. I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm just stupid or if the game stopped holding my hand a little too early or what, because in this section I spent so much time running in circles doing absolutely nothing. I don't know what went on in my brain, but I just couldn't figure out what exactly I was supposed to do here. I've cut the majority of the trouble I had out to save you from getting bored, but I just thought it would be worth mentioning that I didn't find the solution to this for a very long time. I'm talking over half an hour. Anyways, what I was actually supposed to do here was lower the projector screen in the amphitheater, head up to the projector room, and play the reel of film we found earlier. This would give us a little bit of lore about the scientists behind the experiments and what they went through, even testing their experiments on themselves. Then, the bit that took me the longest to figure out was actually pressing the button to the elevator. Yep, I swear to God, I pressed this button so many times and nothing ever happened. I don't know, I felt really stupid, but I genuinely did press the button before this. Anyways, we took the elevator up, accidentally skipped a cutscene, and began our fight with this giant, immobile Mortophilia thing. Honestly, this fight was really easy and really boring. The creature covers its face, which means, as far as I'm aware from my very limited knowledge of playing this game, it won't take any damage. From what I gathered, the only way to solve this was to get close to it so that it would try to attack you, then shoot it in the face when it moves its hand without actually getting attacked. Again, I'm not going to bore you with the gameplay because it was really repetitive and also it had a lot of health, so it just took a really long time in general. But when we do eventually put our last bullet in it, it moves its hand off of this trapdoor, allowing us to move up and down floors without the elevator. Now, if we go back to the stage and pick up this plank of wood, which also took a stupidly long time to find, we can jam the door to the elevator open and climb down the elevator shaft to move into the next act of the game. Also, Stan just straight up died here, and I have no idea why. Like, the elevator just came crashing down on him for no reason. I don't know if that was an important part of the story or if it's something I did wrong, but it was so unnecessary. Anyways, we were now in the school's basements where we would find even more Mortophilia creatures, presumably students or teachers who had been experimented on in the past. There was also more of those screaming sound effects, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's almost as though the game was reminding us about what went on down here, not to forget the pain and suffering of those who were unfortunately experimented on against their will. Heading into this room, there was another creature to kill, but also a passage from a diary written by one of the scientists that were down there. The entry dates back to 1903 and details that one of the scientists, known as Leonard, had actually been a subject of these experiments, stating that he had developed tumors all over his skin, hypersensitivity to UV radiation, and even a deteriorating mental state. Then, over 20 years later, after looking for a way to reverse the harm done to Leonard, the other scientist chooses to inject himself with the Mortophilia gene so to stay alive and continue researching for a cure. On the wall, we also see this slot for a lever, which we would need to come back to later on. Making our way to the room directly opposite, we find these cages scattered around the room, some open and some locked shut with dead creatures inside. Picking up this note on the floor, we read that someone else was here before us and were locked up by Herbert Friedman to be used as a guinea pig in the experiments, much like other students have been. So, now we know for sure that these creatures we're seeing were all once students at Leafmore High, and the headmaster of the school, Herbert Friedman, was one of the scientists. We knew he was involved since he lured Kenny into the basement, but we didn't have concrete evidence that he was one of the scientists. Now, we do, and it all finally makes sense. Pushing this cage to the side allows us to enter this cell where we would find the lever for the mechanism next door, but then this creature was simply too strong to defeat there and then, and since Josh didn't have any weapons, it was game over. Fortunately, I made a save not too long before this, so I was free to jump right back in without too much backtracking, and this time, instead of taking both characters into the cell, I made use of the partner mechanics again and left Ashley at the door so that Shannon could pick up the lever. Then we immediately switched to Ashley and flee to safety. Safety being a word we use very lightly around here, because suddenly the corridors were swarming with more of these gigantic Mortophilia creatures. Fortunately, with a lot more wiggle room on our side in this long corridor, we were able to take out both of these creatures and make our way back to the lever room where we could pop the lever in the mechanism to unveil a secret ladder behind this bookcase. Heading down the ladder and through this door, we finally found Kenny holed up inside a cell, but it wasn't victory at last, because just mere moments later, Friedman hits us with a surprise: knockout gas. When we wake up, we're all locked in cells alongside Kenny, and it seems to be completely doomed until we find this long bar with a hook on the end of it. Switching over to Kenny, we can use that bar to hit a button on the wall and open all of the cells. Exiting our cells, we find these bolt cutters propped up against the wall, which means we now have a means of accessing areas in the school that were previously inaccessible. So, anyways, I hope you guys haven't grown too fond of Shannon yet, because, yeah, I kind of messed up. But I do want to just quickly talk about something.
Shannon! Oh, shit!
I've noticed that the characters don't really have much expression about them, if that makes sense. Like, Shannon is Kenny's sister, and yet, despite watching her die right in front of him, He doesn't really convey any kind of raw, extreme emotion that you would expect an older brother to express after witnessing the death of his sibling. It feels like a lot was missed out during the development of these characters, because at this point in the game, it doesn't really feel like any of them are connected anymore. I really wanted to stick with the whole "they're not just shells of people waiting to be played by you" thing that I mentioned at the start of the video. But seeing this happen and not getting any sort of real proof of that beyond them just having these unique abilities that separate them from each other, I don't know, it was just really disappointing. Anyways, carrying on with the story, we take that bar with the hook that we found and use it to pull down this ladder and enter the school grounds once again. I decided to take Ashley with me going forward because I wasn't really bothered about resource gathering at this point. I just wanted Ashley's strength to help with the harder enemies. Since earlier on, Kenny revealed he'd been infected with the motophilia gene, we make our way to the sickbay to find the nurse, and I want you to just watch what happens when we enter the room.
Hey, Miss Wixon.
That's right, we just saw this game in first person for maybe just under 2 seconds, but still, it was first person, and if you know anything about me or my videos, I kind of have a thing for changing the viewpoint of video games, especially into first person. So if anyone knows how to mod old games, let me know. Anyways, before she sadly passed away, the nurse told us that Friedman did in fact develop an antidote for the motophilia gene, and it's back in the basement. Of course, we just came from there, so she tells us how to get in using the alternative entrance that Kenny was originally lured down at the beginning of the game. As you might have guessed, the gate we originally entered the gardens through at the beginning of the game is actually locked now, so we have to find an alternative means of getting there. Heading into the boarding school building, we're immediately faced with one of the larger motophilia creatures, and after putting it down, we start exploring some of the rooms. In this one, the camera focuses on a chimney flue, a sign that this would play an important role later on. Heading up the hall and up the stairs, we hear more of those horrible screams, and we find even more rooms to explore. Straight ahead is a weak and unstable floor, which we would have to intentionally walk and not run across to make sure we didn't plummet to our death. Walking straight across and through these double doors, we find another area where we would begin to start making some progress. If you look at the wall here, we can see some light shining through the cracks, as well as an infected student sitting on the chair in the corner of the room. I honestly thought he would attack me, but just one bullet to the head, and I kind of felt bad for doing that. Anyways, we can knock the bookshelf into the wall to break it down, revealing a hidden room where we would find a safe box. A visibly heavy safe box at that. At first, I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, but after carrying it around and looking a bit silly, we find that same chimney fluid that we saw earlier, and interacting with it lets us drop it down. Returning to the room with the chimney fluid downstairs, we're suddenly faced with another giant slug-like creature again, blocking our access to the safe. So, after dealing with that thing, we pick up the now broken safe and find a map of the basement, a key to the office in the library where Friedman scattered off to earlier on, and then we also get this cutscene that basically details the timeline of the experiments, including controversies surrounding it and Friedman's involvement. I'll let it play out because the lore here is really important.
6 cases of missing persons connected with the school. Strange that the police have never come up with anything about it. Our school was founded in 1902 by twin brothers Herbert and Leonard Friedman. Herbert is still our principal. That would mean he's at least 100 years old. I just found their birth certificates. Judging by that
How have they stayed so young for so long?
I found this photo of a woman with Herbert, or Leonard. She looks a lot like Ms. Wixon. Photos from
According
the
to
late
this marriage
19th century.
certificate,
Ms. Wixon and Leonard got married in 1885. Leonard was last seen in 1921. He supposedly died in a plane crash, but they never found his body, or even the plane. I found some articles about the Friedman brothers and their experiments, said to be so original that they went beyond
In
human
1890,
morality. They went on an expedition to Africa to find medicinal plants. They stayed for 6 months and brought back a large number of hitherto unknown varieties. One strange specimen, mortophilia, became the basic subject of their research. Photos of disfigured people in his office. I absolutely must find his lab. Underneath the high school, in the basement. I managed to follow him unnoticed through the gardens to the basement of their house. I searched the lab, and according to Friedman's notes, the anti-aging serum is yet to be perfected. The photos of half-human creatures bear witness to the failed attempts. Prolonged exposure to the sun results in mutation. There's also a big door in one room. I don't know what's behind it, but I think I understand how to open it. There's a mechanism with little statues. I've seen 3 of them around the library and 1 in the gardens. Tomorrow I'll go and try to see what's going on behind that door.
Towards the end of the cutscene, we learn that there's a giant door in the basement somewhere, and the only way to open it is to collect 4 statuettes, 3 of which have been scattered around the library, with the final one being in the garden, and use them on a giant machine down there to open the door. So, our next step is to head to the library to begin finding these, with the first one being in the library office. In there, we also find a reel of film called Archive 24, a key, and a very powerful flashlight. Upon leaving the library, we bump into Walden, who questions why we're still here, and then steals the map of the basement we found. Unfortunately, I accidentally skipped this cutscene while trying to pause because I really needed to pee, so yeah, sorry about that. The key we found, though, does unlock a staircase to the upper floor of the library building, so we head up there, back into the library, and collect the second statuette.
Just one more statue to find.
You'll notice Kenny says just one more statue to find after picking this up. Well, that's because there was actually another statue in the dormitory building, but my OBS crashed when I found that, so I don't actually have the footage. I know, I'm a bad content creator, I'm sorry. Well, now that we had all 3 of the statuettes located in the school buildings, it was time to find our way to the gardens. The cutscene we watched after collecting the safe earlier on mentioned needing a code to a gate, and that code just so happened to be showed at the end of the Archive 24 film we collected in the library office. That same reel of film also shows us a bunch of lore about the experiments taking place here, so I strongly suggest watching this too. With the gate code in mind, we headed over there and unlocked it to begin our journey back into the basement.
It's friggin' cold out here.
After breaking this wall down and nearly losing all of our progress to these creatures, we grabbed the 4th and final statuette in the garden before rushing to the exit as we were instantly swarmed by creatures. Now that we were back at the old house from the beginning of the game, we grabbed the lever to the secret passage, and for some reason Kenny says, "What is this?" As if he didn't already experience all of this. Was there some kind of memory wiping going on here? Anyways, we make our way down and suddenly we were back in the winding and twisting laboratory corridors, run rampant with mortophilia and a strange atmosphere in the air that somehow now felt more manageable than ever. I mean, we had our flashlights, we had our guns, we learned so much about the creatures and how to protect ourselves against them. We were ready. I will say, being back here as Kenny in the exact same spot as we originally were was a great addition to the story. It really shifted the perspective to making you think, okay, I'm ready now, you know? Instantly dodging past the large mortophilia creature and heading back to where we were once held hostage, we make our way through safely this time. But that safety was only a brief experience, because as we progress further, we almost lose Ashley completely. Fortunately, we did have an energy drink available to heal her up, so we switched her over to the shotgun and headed back inside for round 2, this time knocking the creature down and clearing the path ahead. Following the path round, we head through these doors and eventually discover the large machine mentioned in the cutscene we saw, to which Kenny says, "What are these machines?"
What are these machines?
Seriously, I'm starting to worry about his memory at this point. We begin placing the statues on their pedestals, which fortunately didn't require a specific order or anything, and then we take care of the creature blocking the path to the nearby lever mechanism. Once that was done, we needed to actually find the lever for the mechanism, so we head through the door on the left and run straight down the corridor. Entering the door at the end, we find ourselves back inside the room with the cells we were previously locked in, which obviously was the wrong room to be in. But it was really cool to see the entire facility loop back around like this. There were 2 creatures here that we had to take care of before we could even begin to find the lever, but fortunately with Ashley's strength ability, it wasn't too difficult to put them down quickly. After finding the lever and Kenny again questioning what it was.
What is this thing?
Oh, Kenny, you're definitely ill. It was time to return to the giant machine and pull the lever.
Walden, stop. That won't help.
You're lying!
But it won't do you any good.
That's the antidote! Give it to me, right now!
You've been exposed to too much light.
No!
Walden, stop.
Give me the antidote or I'll shoot!
You've already started to mutate! Forgive me. I almost found the formula. I almost did it. Oh.
Heading straight into the boss battle against the now heavily mutated Walden, I was confused. For some reason, Ashley just wasn't too eager to shoot him, but also the path seemed to be blocked on either side. Eventually, when I did start shooting him, one of his arms seemed to react to it, and after a few shots, it actually fell off. With this, a spot of light appeared from the roof and shone down on the ground, and standing in it actually protected us from the wave of Motophilia. Ashley, unfortunately, succumbed to the damage though. Whilst attempting to take care of the second arm, we took a hit that just tipped Kenny over the edge, and he also died. So now, with just Josh left alive, we headed back inside, but honestly, I was still quite confused. It still seemed like I couldn't get to the other side, so I just started shooting at his body, but nothing seemed to work. And then, well, it was game over. Heading back in for attempt number 2, I made sure to leave Ashley behind and try it with just Kenny so that if we did die, we would still have 2 other characters alive to try again with. I quickly took care of the first 2 arms, and after a little looking around, I noticed that our aim had actually locked onto the third arm, so we got rid of that too. The beam of light for that one appeared on the other side of the room, which led me to believe I was being stupid and we should be able to actually get there. Walking into the pool of Motophilia beneath Walden's base damaged us a little, but did allow us to get around his barricades. From there, we were able to get rid of his other arms one by one until eventually, Walden had a phase 2. This time though, we were above the ground, and the sunlight and UV radiation were beaming down on him, slowly whittling away at what was left of his lifespan. In this phase, Walden has 2 attacks that he plays in a cycle. This overhead slapping attack, which he does about 3 times in a row, and then this unavoidable sweeping attack. At first, I didn't really know what I was supposed to do here, so I just started shooting at him whilst avoiding his attacks where possible, but eventually the sweeping attack would either take me down to low health or straight up kill me. After a couple attempts playing this second phase as Kenny, then Ashley, and then Josh, I did begin to notice a pattern. If I avoid his slapping attacks, he'll eventually move on to a sweeping attack, but before he does that, he lets out a different kind of roar to usual. At that point, if I shoot him, it'll cancel his unavoidable sweeping attack and will allow me to keep fighting without taking damage. Do this over and over for long enough, and not soon after, he succumbs to the light. Obscure. This game was good. Admittedly, it was probably the most immersed I've ever been in a video game in a very long time. Something about the 4:3 aspect ratio and the control I had over each character made every experience feel very personal. I almost felt like I was a kid again, playing an old school horror game that probably would have scared me shitless at the time. That being said, it is absolutely worth noting that Obscure has its problems. As I mentioned earlier, the lack of emotions presented by the characters is a problem, because when your sister or a lifelong friend or even just a classmate you see almost every single weekday for years on end, when they die in front of your eyes to an unholy, abhorrent, flesh-like abomination, or to an elevator in Stan's case, you're supposed to feel something, and it genuinely felt like none of them did. Void of emotion completely, only pretending to care because it's expected that they say something, even if it's just, "Oh my god, Ashley," you know? Not only that, but the ending of the game definitely left a lot to be desired. I mean, the boss fight in itself was cool and quite unique compared to other games that were made at the time, but the actual final cutscene in the game didn't answer the questions that were still remaining. What did the future hold for Leafmore High, and what about the 3 characters that we still had left alive at the end of the game? Or what about the Mortophilia gene? Was that done for, or would it continue to live on outside of the experiments? At the time of its release in 2004, opinions of Obscure were very much divided. Some felt it was appropriately dark and atmospheric for a survival horror game at the time, and that I agree with. Others felt it lacked the emotional weight you would expect from high school students trapped in a nightmare scenario, which I also agree with. I think it's fair to say the game was good. The game was good, but it was unpolished, and there was a lot left to be done to truly make this a 10 out of 10 survival horror experience. Despite all of that, the studio behind Obscure, Mighty Rocket Studio, listened deeply to fans and critic reception, and worked hard over the next 5 years to produce a response. That response would be Obscure: The Aftermath.